ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first ever No Punt Intended football cast here on Entertainment Buddha. I'm your host, Nick Hershey. Along with me is my ginger crunching friend, Justin Ludwig.
First time listener, first time caller. I can't say long time listener.
I don't think anybody can at this point. So we're going to give this a go and make some predictions for week one and for the season as well in the world of football and in the world of gambling, since we both enjoy it.
Do we?
A little bit. From time to time, we like to make projections and win or lose. All right. So what do you want to do first? You want to do our season predictions?
Sure. Let's get that out of the way.
All right.
Make some futures for some of these teams.
All right, let's see what we got here. NFC East, who you got?
I have, and I don't think this is a surprise, Philadelphia Eagles.
I agree with you 100% there. I think that division's a little bit on the terrible side, and it's pretty much the Eagles' division to lose. I think for second, I'd probably see Washington maybe, if RG3 stays healthy and performs.
That's tricky. I think Romo is, he's got a chance to be a make or break season, but it's a little tough to gauge what Dallas is going to do right now.
Yeah, and Dallas does have Des Bryant, which, in my opinion, he might be the best receiver in the league this year. And if we're looking at fantasy stuff, Romo's always a good fantasy quarterback. He's just never a good regular season.
Never a good actual quarterback.
Right. Which is fine with me being an Eagles fan. So, let's see. Yeah, so we both have the Eagles there. Who do you have for the NFC West?
I don't think it's a big surprise. Seattle Seahawks. I think they're going to have not as easy of a time that the Eagles will, but it definitely helps that St. Louis loses Sam Bradford. It sounds like everybody's a little down on the Niners this year, and when Carson Palmer is the quarterback in Arizona, I don't know how well they are going to do. Even though he had a good statistical end of last year, I don't know that I would that I'd bet on Carson Palmer. Pardon the pun.
Yeah, and I know last year everyone was kind of down on the Cardinals early. They weren't performing well, and they kind of got it together towards the end of the season. I think they ended up with 10 wins, but still missed the playoffs. As far as the NFC West, I'm with you again there on Seattle. I myself am also down on San Fran a little bit. I'm not quite sure what it is. I just don't feel like they're going to have what it takes to win the division outright. Moving on from there, let's see who you got for the NFC South.
It's a bit of a selection by default. I'm going to pick New Orleans only because I don't know that anybody's done anything to usurp the division crown away from New Orleans, who's largely the same group of fellas.
And I think you're looking at my sheet here because I have the same thing, and my thinking is the same. I think Atlanta's going to do better this year than they did last year. I think they kind of got themselves into a rut that they couldn't get out of. But this year I think they'll perform better. However, I do think New Orleans is the team for the South. Atlanta's defense wasn't great last year, and they didn't really do a whole lot this offseason or the draft to help make it any better. I do think Matt Ryan's going to jump back to where he was previous years, but I don't think it'll be enough to win the division. So I'm going to stick with Drew Brees in New Orleans and their running gun offense, and we'll see what happens with that.
It also didn't help last year that the Falcons lost Julio Jones, week 5. Even though they lost Tony Gonzalez, I think it's a little more of a little better of a trade-off for them to get Julio Jones for this year, even though they lose Tony Gonzalez.
Right. I agree with you there on that one. So, moving right along, let's check out the NFC North.
For them, I think it's going to be Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, only because I think they felt a little gypped last year. Losing Rodgers for most of the season, they didn't feel like they could turn in as good of a card as they could have. Also, it seems like Matt Stafford isn't going to have the bulk of the offense this year, which I don't know if that's quite their bread and butter. Chicago does look pretty good, but I don't think they have quite the tools that Green Bay does.
Right, and this is where we disagree here, because I do have Chicago winning the division. I think the way they played last year, granted their defense hasn't been as great as it was in years past, but Jay Cutler, Brandon Marshall, and Alshon Jeffrey just seemed to find that rhythm that was really special last year. And I think they're going to build off that this year. And as long as Matt Forte stays healthy, he'll be one of the top running backs in the league. I would say probably top 5 or 6, like I said, if he stays healthy. So that's something to keep an eye on. That's going to be a very tough division. I was kind of tossing it up between Chicago, Green Bay, and Detroit. But personally, I think Chicago is going to be the one to come out on top. And I think Jay Cutler is going to have one of those years everyone has been expecting and hoping for him to have. All right, so let's move on down to the AFC, and who do you have in the East?
AFC East, again, it's the New England Patriots. It's their division. I think it wouldn't be too much of a surprise if Miami kind of moves their way into second place. The Jets, I think, are a bit of a wild card, only because they have a few older players that I think still have some ability to make some big plays in Michael Vick, Chris Johnson. They still also have Eric Decker. But I don't know if they have quite the chemistry or the team build that they'll do better than kind of middle of the pack Buffalo Bills. Sammy Watkins, I'm going to be excited to watch, but I don't know, again, that they kind of have the marquee offense that New England does. And the thing that's really going to work out for New England this year is a much better defense, much better secondary.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with you on that. I think it's New England's division to lose. I also think Miami's going to give them a little bit of a run, kind of compete with them for a little bit. I think it kind of hurts Miami a little bit that they play New England in Week 1. Miami doesn't start off with some cupcake games like maybe some other teams in the league do to kind of get that confidence going. But I think if Miami puts up a fight against New England, even if they do lose, that'll still be a confidence booster to them. And the Jets, I just don't see too much happening with them. Their defense last year, their rush defense was one of the best in the league, so that's definitely a plus and something they can build off of. But what do you do? Do you leave Geno Smith at QB? Do you put Michael Vick in and let Geno Smith kind of learn from the bench this year? What would you do in that situation?
I don't know why you wouldn't play Michael Vick, especially with a back that has some explosiveness like Chris Johnson. It will especially help to spread out the offense that you can have a good mobile quarterback. And I think Michael Vick still has some juice left in the tank, even though it's not going to be quite as good as he was in, say, Atlanta or Philadelphia. But I don't know that Geno Smith has quite the resume yet that he can establish himself as the number one outright quarterback.
Right. And along with Chris Johnson, the Jets still have Chris Ivory. So, he's not, the most fantastic running back, but he's definitely serviceable. And, if Johnson stays healthy and the line blocks for him, they could definitely have a potent running game. But yeah, if they're starting Geno Smith at QB, he had his ups and downs last year, some moments of brilliance, but, more or less it was not quite what he was expecting, I'm sure. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and see how that progresses throughout the year and see what the Jets do with their QB situation. Oh, and to touch on the Bills, too, I almost feel bad for them at this point. They lost a bunch of players on defense. They lost Kiko Alonso. He's out for the year. Sammy Watkins, like you said, will be fun to watch. I like E.J. Manuel. I hope he progresses and continues to do well. I know he had his ups and downs last year as well, but that's another player to keep an eye on. He could be kind of a make or break year for him this year. So yeah, we'll see what goes there. And C.J. Spiller is also an explosive back that can put up some numbers provided he stays healthy. And let's see. Moving on next, we got the AFC West.
AFC West, I think it's another situation just like the East. It's Denver's division to lose, even though I do think, and I'll touch on this later as we get to more predictions, I think that San Diego is a team that's going to be on the up and up. It seems like they're a team that's kind of full of some confidence. Phil Rivers had kind of a weird year last year. They got rid of Wisenhunt. And I think now they've kind of they're trying to get themselves a fresh start. Kansas City, I mean, they still do have a great running back in Jamal Charles, but I don't know that they have enough around him, especially with Dwayne Bowe being sidelined for one game, even though he's kind of not quite as flashy as he has been in years past, and they still have to rely on somebody like Alex Smith to be the signal caller. And then as far as Oakland, no, Oakland's not going to
win. Yeah, and I wanted to pick Denver just because Peyton Manning, Demaryius Thomas, Julius Thomas. It's hard to bet against a team that has Peyton Manning, even though he is getting on the tail end of his career. For him to put up numbers like he did last year was insane. However, I did pick San Diego to win the AFC West. I think Denver is just going to have a couple games where they falter. They might not put up as high numbers this year, especially with Wes Welker being out 4 games. They lost Eric Decker. Granted, they got Emmanuel Sanders, so that may work out for them. I'm not quite sure yet. Now, granted, Demaryius Thomas is still a huge threat, but I like San Diego. I know you touched on it a little bit, and I'm sure we'll discuss them a little more as our predictions go on here. But they bolstered their defense. San Diego did, and their offense was really starting to click last year. Phillip Rivers was starting to have the season we expect from him, and I see no reason why that wouldn't continue into this year. You had mentioned they got rid of Wisenhunt and brought in Mike McCoy, who's a very, very good coach, as we saw from last year. And I think, personally for my fantasy football league, I really want Ryan Matthews to do well. So, if he can stay healthy, he can put up some decent numbers. I took went on a little bit of a limb there and took San Diego over Denver West. But we'll see how that pans out. Let's see, next up we had the AFC South. Who do you have there?
It's another one of those win by default kind of divisions. There aren't really any teams that are going to come out of that division that really have a chance to make some noise in the playoffs. But unfortunately, I don't think Jacksonville really has quite the skill set needed to win a division. Tennessee seems like they might be able to do something this year because of the aforementioned Ken Wisenhunt. But I think that largely it's Indianapolis's division to lose, especially with Andrew.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I have Indianapolis winning that division. Tennessee, I see them winning, maybe 9 or 10 games, actually. I think they're going to do well. They have a rookie running back who, Bishop Sankey. I think once he's given a majority of the workload, he's going to produce. And their defense is decent. It's gotten a little bit better compared to last year. And if Jake Locker stays healthy, he was showing signs of improvement and confidence. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. And one thing, and we had talked about rookie quarterbacks, Geno Smith last year, E.J. Manuel last year, and going to Jacksonville, Blake Bortles, as soon as they drafted him, I thought instantly he would be the starter. They've since decided to go with Chad Henne. Normally, that's what I would recommend, and my preference would be to go with a veteran, let the rookie kind of learn from the bench. But they really kept Blake Bortles under wraps this preseason and during spring training. He didn't talk to the media very much. You didn't really hear a lot about him like you did with Johnny Football. So I don't know. I think there's something there that Jacksonville's not letting on, and they're kind of keeping under wraps for the time being.
The one thing I do like about the AFC South is they do have the easier intra-conference schedule, them facing the AFC North, so they don't have to put up with the high-scoring AFC West or kind of the front-loaded AFC East. And they also have an easier interconference schedule because they're taking on the NFC East, which is probably one of the weaker, if not the weakest, NFC division.
Right. I agree with that too. You look at the AFC South, you look at Indianapolis' schedule. Granted, they're going to be playing some tough defenses, and but overall, I think Indianapolis has what it takes to pull out that division. I'm thinking maybe 11 or 12 wins for Indianapolis, possibly more if they get their running game going. Trent Richardson hasn't done what everyone was hoping that he would do. I know Eddie Lacy last year, a fellow Alabama running back, put up some workhorse numbers, and I think that's something teams expected out of Richardson, and it just hasn't happened yet. So maybe this is the year he kind of takes a little bit, gets a chip on his shoulder about that and starts putting up some numbers. Okay, moving on, we have the AFC North.
AFC North is always one of those divisions that everybody kind of beats up on each other. But I have a feeling that it's going to be a little tougher than expected on the Bengals. It seems like everybody's a little down on Andy Dalton this year. I'm not sure why, but I will just go with that flow. And I think Pittsburgh, whatever they've been smoking, I think it's going to put them right into first place. And I think that they are primed, especially with a good running back core. They still have Emmanuel Sanders, one of the better wide receivers.
I think you mean Antonio
Brown. That's what I meant.
Yes. So you think Yins are gonna finish first?
I think Yins are gonna have another division crown.
Now, are you just saying that because your girlfriend's a Steelers fan?
No, I'm not being a homer. I think. I mean, it's tough in the sense that Steelers aren't able to spread the ball as well as they did when they had a deep threat like Mike Wallace. But I think even still with Antonio Brown, they're giving Ben a chance that he can spread the ball around. And hopefully Le'Veon Bell kind of show that his show some flashes of what he did in his rookie season. He can improve on his yards per carry. Hopefully get a few more touchdowns.
Maybe stop smoking pot.
Stop smoking pot. That might help.
Well, I will say the one thing Pittsburgh has going for them this year, you mentioned Mike Wallace not being there, leaving 2 years ago. But they did pick up Marcus Wheaton, and he's projected to be kind of a deep threat alongside Antonio Brown, so he might be kind of a breakout star for Pittsburgh. I'm with you with the Le'Veon Bell thing. I think he's a very solid running back. They also have LeGarrette Blount, who's just a workhorse and animal. He doesn't break a lot of tackles, but he can push the pile for 4 or 5 yards easily. Now, having said that, I picked Cincinnati to win the division. I just think their offense is pretty solid right now. I know, like you mentioned, Andy Dalton has been hated on by a lot of people. However, he's got AJ Green, and he might rank right behind Calvin Johnson and Des Bryant in the receiver area. But when you have AJ Green who could just jump up and catch anything and break tackles, that's definitely a plus, obviously. And I think at the running back position, Giovanni Bernard's going to have himself quite a year. I wish they would have given him more carries last year, but having been a rookie, I understand kind of sharing the load with Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis. So hopefully the North Carolina representative can carry the load this year and help them advance in the division.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's hard to really get down on Andy Dalton. People kind of...
Is it because he's a ginger?
It's... I don't have a pithy comeback for that. I'm not entirely sure. It seems like people are guesstimating what they would call a regression to the mean that he had year last year that was kind of a banner year for him, even though he threw more interceptions. He also threw for more touchdowns. He had a career year for yards, and I think that they feel that his confidence isn't there, that the playoff implications are not quite there because he's been 1-out in each of the last 3 years. So I think it's more of a confidence thing. It's not as though he doesn't have the weapons around him, because as you said, he does still have AJ Green, one of the better wide receivers. He does have a solid running back with Giovanni Bernard. So I'm not drinking the punch that Andy Dalton's kind of not washed up, but that he's just not going to have as great of a year as he did last year.
Right, and I can see that defense if people want to go that route. But given that division they're in, Pittsburgh's not the team they were. Their defense is aging with Ike Taylor and Troy Polamalu. Granted they got Ryan Shazier in the draft this year, who I think is going to have a fantastic year. But I mean, who else in the division? You have Cleveland and Baltimore. Baltimore, I think, could put up a fight for the division. I know they're going to miss Ray Rice for a couple games. Baltimore, for me, just depends on Joe Flacco and whether he can kind of come off the terrible season he had last year. They did get Steve Smith from formerly of the Panthers. I think that's definitely a plus, in their receiving game. So maybe that's kind of a step in the right direction for Baltimore, but I don't see them beating out Cincinnati for the division this year. Next up, we're going to go with who is your NFC wildcard picks? Who are your NFC wildcard picks?
NFC wildcard picks. Well, since I'm figuring that Green Bay is going to take the NFC North, it seems like a reasonable choice that Chicago would be a close second. I don't believe that anybody in the NFC East is going to get it, just because other than the Eagles, everybody else is kind of a middle-of-the-road team. The NFC West, I thought about having the Niners, but I don't know that they're going to have quite the year they did last year, 12-4. So kind of, by process of elimination, I said, and I took a little bit of a flyer, I said Atlanta Falcons. So my two picks for the wild card would be Chicago Bears and Atlanta Falcons.
Okay. All right. I like that, going out on a limb a little bit.
I have a little faith in their in Atlanta's offense. I think that they have the ability to put up a lot of numbers. Last year they kind of got the short end of the stick with Julio Jones. But I think that Matt Ryan still has plenty of tools with Jones and Roddy White, and maybe even Steven Jackson. Who knows?
All right. Well, I'm going to do a little flipperoo with you. You had picked Green Bay to win the NFC North. I picked Chicago. So naturally, I picked Green Bay to get the wild card. And on my end, I picked San Fran to get the second wild card. While I don't think they're going to... I think they're going to have a little bit less of a better season than they did last year. I still think they're going to squeak into the playoffs. I don't think Arizona is going to have what it takes. Some of the other NFC teams I was kind of on the fence about, like Detroit, Tampa Bay. I kind of wanted to put them there. I just don't think they're quite there yet. I think Josh McCown in Tampa with Mike Evans is going to, and Vincent Jackson, and I think Doug Martin's going to have a phenomenal year. But I don't quite have them in the playoffs this year. Maybe next year. Lovie Smith is a fantastic coach. He's proven he can win. But I have Tampa just missing the playoffs, and I have San Fran getting in as the second wild card. And next up then is the AFC wild cards.
Since I have a feeling that the AFC West is going to be pretty competitive between the top two, I have San Diego as my one. For my two, I think that Miami has done enough upgrades for their offensive line that they can protect the quarterback a little bit better this year, and they can get a little more mileage out of Tannehill and perhaps utilize that former Steelers deep threat Mike Wallace. So I picked as the second team Miami Dolphins.
All right. Well, I have Miami in as well. Basically for the same reasons. I think Tannehill is going to have a solid year. I don't think he's going to be phenomenal, but I think he'll have a solid year. I think it helps that no Sean Moreno's on the team, provided he stays healthy. He's a solid running back. Decent out of the backfield for the little screen passes. So I think they're going to sneak into that second wild card spot, or excuse me, one of the wild card spots. And then the other one I have the Denver Broncos. Like I said before, I didn't have them winning the division. I think there's just going to be a couple things that, unforeseen things that happen that cause Denver to kind of slip out of that top spot. But I still have them making the playoffs because at the end of the day, it's still Peyton Manning, and you can't have Peyton Manning missing the playoffs no matter who he's playing for, in my opinion. And then let's move on to the championships. Who do you have for the NFC Championship?
I have this feeling that your Philadelphia Eagles are going to have a pretty good regular season.
And now you're just jinxing it.
I know. Maybe it's on purpose. Maybe it's not. The Eagles in the NFC East, they kind of get the luck of the schedule. It's going to be a little tough with the NFC West, but they do get the AFC South, and then Philadelphia has a chance to possibly go 6-0 in their intra-division games, having a weak NFC East. So it's a good chance for them to amass one of the top two records, earn themselves a bye, and then I think, depending on how well Seattle does, who I think is the other team that's going to get the bye, depending how well they do, it might be a bit of an easier playoff run for them. So I think that because they're not going to have to play in the wild card round, they can just go to the division. I think it's Philadelphia's show in the NFC.
All right. I like hearing that. I'm not going to argue. I don't want to jinx the team myself, so I'm glad someone else picked them. But yeah, I don't know. Like I wanted to pick the Eagles. I don't know if it's just because I'm worried about being superstitious or what, but I actually picked New Orleans to come out of the NFC Championship. I don't know what it is. I just got this feeling New Orleans is just going to continue their high-powered offense. I think rookie wide receiver Brandon Cooks is going to be a phenomenal player for them as the third receiver. They lost Darren Sproles, but they can use Cooks, who's super fast. They can use him on screens. They can use him as a deep threat, alongside Marcus Colston and Nick Toon. So I have New Orleans going to the NFC Championship game, and that's where I stand with that.
Do you have a bugaboo with Seattle repeating as champs? Is that why you didn't pick them?
You know what? I just feel like it's too difficult to pick a team to go back-to-back Super Bowls. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't happen very often, at least in recent history. So that's kind of why I'm kind of sketchy on Seattle. Like you had mentioned before, I don't think they're going to have quite the year that they had last year. Granted, they haven't really changed much. They basically have the same offense. The defense is still going to be phenomenal, I'm sure. Percy Harvin stays healthy. He's going to be a major threat like he always is. But for whatever reason, I just feel New Orleans is a team to go with. They play really well for Sean Payton. I think Drew Brees is motivated, and I think they got the right group of guys to get that NFC Championship and make it to the Super Bowl. I don't know. I'm going out on a limb. All right, and then who do you have for the AFC Championship?
AFC Championship, I still have a little more faith in that Denver offense. Defense isn't too bad, but I think that it's going to be one of those things that they're, again, like Philadelphia in the NFC, their road to... I tried to work out all the little pairings, and I tried to come up with the AFC playoff picture and then sort of work through the potential bracket. I think, again, I'm speculating. I have this feeling that it's going to be a Denver-Indianapolis matchup in the playoffs. And then I think it's going to be New England against maybe who did I have it? I think I said something like a San Diego or something. Anyway, I have this feeling that New England's going to get a little beat up during the division round, and then Denver is just going to be firing on all cylinders. Peyton Manning is Peyton Manning, and I think that their offense has quite a little more gusto than some of the other teams in the AFC. So that's why I picked the Denver Broncos.
Okay. All right, certainly reasonable explanations there. I can't blame you for that. However, I went with San Diego. I just have a solid feeling in them, and the additions they made to their defense, as I mentioned earlier. Defense is better than it was last year, and their offense was firing on all cylinders. They were one of the higher scoring offenses last year, and I think that's going to carry over to this year. I kind of wanted to go with Indianapolis because I'm a huge Andrew Luck fan, and especially last year after the way they played against Kansas City in that playoff game. I forget exactly the score, but Kansas City was up huge, and Andrew Luck just put the Colts on his back and ended up leading him to a 45-44 victory, and just kind of put the entire state of Kansas in dejection over that game. So, and I think that's part of the reason too this year that Kansas City might not come out as hot as they did last year. They had a really easy schedule the first few games if you go back and look at it. And eventually I think Andy Reid's going to catch up with him like they did with the Eagles. So overall, yeah, I have San Diego in the AFC Championship against New Orleans. And then who's your big Super Bowl winner?
Super Bowl winner, I have some faith that Peyton Manning, being used to a dome in years past, might have an easier time come January, February. I picked the Denver Broncos over Philadelphia Eagles. So unfortunately, you get asked to the dance, but you don't quite get to go.
Man, finished second in the homecoming contest.
Exactly.
Huh? Always the bridesmaid, never the bride. All right. Well, I like your picks. Thanks for putting my Eagles in the Super Bowl, even though they're going to lose to the Broncos, apparently. I just have this...
They're just excited to be there, so it's okay.
You know what? I can't blame you. If they get there, I'll be happy. You know, obviously, if they win, I'll be parading down Broad Street with the rest of them. But there's this statistic, I don't have it in front of me, about teams who lose the Super Bowl, what they do the following year. And a lot of times, those teams that lose the Super Bowl don't even make the playoffs. Now, because it's the Broncos, because it's Peyton Manning, we both have them in the playoffs, but I do not have Denver, going to the big show. I actually have San Diego beating New Orleans, so I got the Superchargers winning it all. I'm putting it on Phillip Rivers and Keenan Allen and Ryan Matthews and Antonio Gates and Darius Green, and they're gonna carry me to victory this year. I feel it. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I guess week one is gonna set the tone for everything. But it seems like there's a lot of good vibes surrounding these AFC West teams.
Yeah, and that's something that everyone's been talking about. Some of the other podcasts I listen to, some of the other things I've been reading, they're really high on San Diego. And even New Orleans too. I was just reading something earlier about how what was it, maybe a month or two ago, the odds of New Orleans winning the Super Bowl was, I think, at 20-1, and now it's down to 7-1. So a lot of action's been going on New Orleans there. So we'll see what happens. That's what makes this fun. We're going to move right along here and go on with our MVP and Rookie of the Year picks. So who is your NFC MVP offensive?
NFC offensive MVP, I think the layoff last year is going to recharge Aaron Rodgers, and I think that the Green Bay Packers have kind of a chip on their shoulder from last year, so I think he's going to come firing right out of the gate. And I think it's going to be Aaron Rodgers with a great season, especially since they're going to reshift around the offense to kind of take away some of the load from him and put it onto their running back core. So I think it's a good chance for him to take advantage of the time that he has when he's chucking the ball, and I think he's going to have just as great of a year as he normally has. So it's Aaron Rodgers.
All right, and then who do you have for your? Actually, I'll tell my NFC Offensive Player MVP. I'm going to go with LaShawn McCoy. I think in the Chip Kelly offense, he showed last year that he can really thrive, and they've definitely had some more time to work together and get into that rhythm. They're gonna last year they didn't have a full season with Nick Foles under center. So I think having him as the number one starter throughout practice and preseason games, their rhythm's really going to be there. Plus, they have the addition of Darren Sproles, which helps take some of the slack off of what they lost when they let Deshaun Jackson go. Which to me, I was questionable about that at first. Like, yeah, you don't want one of your best players cut. Obviously, there were some reasons that weren't made public, or the reasons that were made public might not have been suitable enough. I have a feeling Deshaun's going to come back and haunt the Eagles in the 2 games they play against the Redskins. But overall, I think LaShawn McCoy is going to win the the NFC offensive MVP. And with the help of Darren Sproles, who's always a problem for defenses, whether he's lined up at running back or in the slot as a receiver, and even as a kick returner. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for. And with your pick of the Eagles going to the Super Bowl, hopefully that's largely with the help of a great season from Shady McCoy. All right, and then let's see, who do you have for your AFC MVP?
AFC MVP, I think he's going to be drinking the Kool-Aid. I think he's going to be supercharged. It's going to be Phillip Rivers. There's just something in the air for the San Diego Chargers, and I think he's going to be the one leading the charge, no pun intended. But I have a feeling that he's going to come out slinging, just like Aaron Rodgers. They got something to prove, a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and I think that their team is going to have a great 2014, and it's going to be partly due to a great offensive year by Phillip Rivers.
All right. Well, you know what? I picked the same thing. I think Rivers is going to have a fantastic year. Obviously, I think so because I have them winning the Super Bowl. So he's my AFC MVP. I think, like I say, he's going to come out slinging. He's got a solid coach behind him. As they showed last year, they were, starting to put a lot of stuff together. Keenan Allen was becoming a threat all over the field. And, if Ryan Matthews stays healthy, that's a plus. They have Danny Woodhead, who's always, digging for yards and causing problems, in the middle of the field or on screen passes. So he's an easy guy to lose in there. He's only like 5'6", 5'7". So
he's wiry.
He's an easy guy to. He's wiry. That's the perfect word for him. He's a spark plug. So yeah, that's who I got for my MVP for the AFC. So let's move on here to Rookie of the Year, NFC offensive.
I think he has the build for it. It's Mike Evans for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's a big guy, big target. Even though he doesn't have the greatest quarterback with Josh McCown, I think he just has the physical build. He was able to kind of work with Johnny Manziel when they were at Texas A&M, but I think he kind of has the tools. He's got the makeup, and I think he's got the chance to really show off, especially with maybe drawing some targets away from Vincent Jackson that they kind of shifted more towards Mike Evans this year. So I think he's going to have the potential to have a really good year. So that's why I chose Mike Evans for the Rookie of the Year.
Okay, yeah, and I know that's a name on everybody's lips, and I can understand why. Like you said, he's a big target, very physical guy, and he caught a lot of passes from Johnny Football. Having said that, my offensive Rookie of the Year, I'm going with a wide receiver, Brandon Cooks for New Orleans. He's another wiry guy. He's very, very fast. And he's very, very motivated. I read multiple stories about this guy and his work ethic. It's fantastic. I think having him under Sean Payton is going to be phenomenal, and especially in that Saints running gun offense. They lost Darren Sproles. They pick up Brandon Cooks. They could kind of line him up anywhere in the field, almost kind of like Deshaun Jackson. Run reverses. He could do kick returns. The whole bit. So he's my pick for offensive Rookie of the Year. So we'll see how that goes. And again, as far as I have New Orleans going, I think he's going to be a big part of that. Take some of the pressure off Marquez Colston and the other guys. So let's move on then. Who's your NFC Defensive Player of the Year, or Rookie of the Year? Excuse me.
AFC Rookie of the Year?
Yes, I'm sorry.
AFC Rookie of the Year?
AFC
Why not? It's clowny. It's a clowny question, bro. Just pick clowny.
You taking the easy one?
Just take an easy way out.
Okay. All right. I like that. I respect that. He's had a good preseason. A couple minor injuries, nothing serious at this point, and I think it helps too that he's lined up against J.J. Watt. So you can't really double team one or the other without the other causing problems. So I think that's a legitimate pick. I don't hate that.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to try and double team two players, especially if they're attacking from the same side. I mean, the Texans defense has some potential, but it's just going to be way too much with them having two powerful guys coming from the same side.
And as far as my AFC Offensive Rookie of the Year, I'm going with another receiver. I'm going with Marquise Lee in Oakland. Fresh out of USC. I know he's got a rookie quarterback in Derek Carr throwing to him. I think if they can get into rhythm early, that's going to be a huge part. Oakland's running backs, they have Darren McFadden still, and they have Maurice Jones-Drew. Those guys are still threats, even though McFadden gets hurt, Maurice Jones-Drew gets hurt. If they can stay somewhat healthy and share the load, that's going to cause some problems for the defense. And if Derek Carr can get into a flow early on and get into a rhythm with his receivers, I think he might surprise a few people. I think just the other day he was named the starter ahead of Matt Schaub. So we'll see if that lasts for the season or if that's just a temporary thing. But yep, I'm going with Marquise Lee, so we'll see what happens with that. Okay, anything else you want to add about preseason predictions before we move on to week one?
Preseason predictions. I don't think I really have anything. It's something I'm just ready to get back into week one.
All right. Let's take a look. Game one we have Thursday night. We have Green Bay at Seattle. Seattle is favored at -6. Who are you taking in that game?
Well, first off, let me just say how dumb I am, because the whole time I was thinking that this game was being played at Green Bay, and so it kind of changes what I was thinking about it. I still like Green Bay +6, and let me just preface by saying that if I were to be participating in the Vegas Super Contest, this would be one of my picks. Again, it's going back to kind of working through Green Bay winning the division, Seattle winning the division. It's going to be an easier road for Seattle this year because of their schedule, the way that it shook out for the NFC West. They have the AFC West, which is a bit rough, but then they also have the NFC East, so that's going to be kind of easy for them. For Green Bay, they've got a trickier schedule, so I think that Green Bay kind of has a little more incentive to win. Aaron Rodgers with that layoff, I think, actually helped because he didn't have to go through the rigmarole of a full season. Seattle is good. I just think 6 points is way too many, so I'm taking Green Bay +6.
Even after last year, the way Seattle played at home, I mean, they basically blew everybody out when they played in Seattle.
They did. It's a tough place to play. But I just have this feeling that Green Bay has more incentive to come out of the gate with a 1-0 record than does Seattle.
Okay. And just for our listeners who may not be familiar, do you want to give a quick explanation on the Vegas Super Contest?
Vegas Super Contest is a contest in which participants select 5 games each week against the spread, and each correct guess is worth a point. Any pushes where the teams tie for the final spread is worth half a point. If you select it, any incorrect guesses is worth 0, and it goes off the most points at the end of the year. They're speculating that this year first prize could be worth in the area of $700,000.
That's a lot of
cash.
And do you know what the entry fee is?
The entry fee is $1,500.
Okay. So not a bad profit if you can walk away.
No, and it's really not. It's not as difficult as it sounds, because looking at seasons past, it seems as though getting 3 out of 5 every week puts you in pretty good position to be one of the top participants. So it's not like you have to get all of them right.
Right.
Even flipping a coin would put you in pretty good shape.
Now, the one thing I do want to bring up, we're talking about Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, and I know you had mentioned that he didn't have to, go through the entire season last year like most other players. So he's a little bit more fresh. He has been dating Olivia Munn. Are you familiar with her at all? All right. And I always wonder how an athlete, especially a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who's one of the biggest names in football. He's got State Farm commercials. He's got the Packers. He's got a Super Bowl ring under his belt already. How does he handle the celebrity that comes along with dating someone like Olivia Munn? For those who might not be familiar, she was in Iron Man 2. She's in Magic Mike. She was in the Newsroom as well. So just to give you a couple there. Do you think dating, a celebrity has any sort of effect on how a player performs?
I mean, it's tough with Olivia Munn just because she's kind of involved in different endeavors. She was involved in a lot of those GTV shows. So maybe it's one of those things where they just go home and they play video games or something and just unwind.
Oh, that would be fantastic. I hope that's how.
I mean, Tony Romo was Jessica Simpson, so maybe she just nagged at him all the time, so he's just kind of distracted. But I don't know. Maybe they just go home and they, play checkers or something, just something completely unrelated to football.
Well, maybe we can get Olivia Munn and Aaron Rodgers on our regular Budacast to talk about what's going on in the video game world.
Yeah, that'd be great. But I have a feeling, I don't know. With her, I think it's Munn's the word.
Always with the puns. All right. Well, going back to the picks here. So you took Green Bay at +6. I'm going to take Seattle at -6. I just think Seattle's too good at home. I know you had mentioned that Green Bay has slightly tougher road to the playoffs or to the division win than Seattle does. I still think that 12th man is insane. Plus, let's not forget the starting center for Green Bay is out, and it will now be rookie Corey Linsley snapping the ball to Aaron Rodgers. And they did not practice together much this offseason or during the preseason games. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that first series, dealing with the noise and see if there's any false starts or miscommunications between the two.
Right.
So,
it's going to be
again, just something
road.
to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's going to be a tougher road for them being Seattle. For any other place, I wouldn't think that'd be as big of a deal. But as you said, playing in Seattle is kind of a different.
Well, he was, yeah, and he was a 5th round draft pick, so he probably wasn't expecting to be in this position. At this point, week 1. But here he is, so let's see how he steps up to that tomorrow night and see how he does. Next game I have on the list here is Jacksonville at Philadelphia. Philadelphia is -10.5.
It's a lot of points, but I think Jacksonville's just that bad.
You think so?
Yeah, 10.5 seems fine, especially with the type of offense that Chipper runs. It's going to be way too high octane. There's going to be way too many things going on. The only thing I'm a little worried about is some garbage time. But I think that by that time it's going to be, 17 to 20 points that Philly's ahead, and it's just not going to be enough. That 10.5 is going to be, not enough. So I think Philly by 10.5 is, or giving 10.5 is plenty of them.
No, I'm kind of on the fence a little bit. I actually have Jacksonville with the 10.5. I mean, I think the general rule of thumb is that any underdog that's given double digits, you go for the points. I want to pick the Eagles. I think they're going to blow out Jacksonville, but like you said, I think it's going to come down to kind of a garbage time thing, and Jacksonville is going to get a touchdown late. Not that it's going to affect the outcome of the game, but it'll affect the spread. So that's kind of why I have Jacksonville in there. They've got Chad Henne starting. He hasn't been as good as in his career as many people might have thought coming out of Michigan. But he's still a veteran quarterback who knows how to play the game. He's got a solid group of receivers in Cecil Shorts and why can't I think of the other guy on Jacksonville, their receiver? Not Justin Blackman, because he's still in trouble. So let me take a look real quick.
It's Marquise Lee.
Right. So yeah, and I even picked him to be my pick.
The only thing that I'm apprehensive about is their running situation, because their starter right now is former Minnesota Viking Toby Gerhart. He doesn't even have 300 carries for his whole career. I mean, last year he had 36. So he's definitely untested. So it's going to be a little tougher for Chad Henne to have to rely on the passing game a little more than he would normally have to, especially without having Justin Blackman and having to be replaced with Marquise Lee. I don't think that they're going to be firing on enough cylinders.
Right, and I made the mistake earlier. For some reason, I was thinking Marquise Lee was drafted by the Raiders. So he's still my pick for Rookie of the Year, just with a different team. So that's what I get for not thoroughly doing my research like I thought I did. But we live and learn. So moving on, the next game I have is New Orleans at Atlanta. New Orleans -3.
I'm okay with New Orleans giving up 3 points. It's going to be one of those games that's going to be a lot of touchdowns. It's two offenses that are just way too high-powered. I don't think it's going to come down to a game of field goals, so I felt pretty comfortable with New Orleans giving up 3 points.
Okay, yeah, and I also have New Orleans. I think this might be a 5 or 6 point win for them. I think Atlanta's going to compete for most of the game just because Julio Jones is there, like you said earlier. Roddy White's there. Yeah, they lost Tony Gonzalez, but with those two receivers and Harry Douglas, I think they're gonna be solid. If they can stay healthy, their passing attack is going to be pretty dangerous. But I think New Orleans has what it takes to get those 3 points and, like I said, win by 5 or 6. So, and if I were doing the Vegas Super Contest, that would be one of my picks. Would be New Orleans at -3.
Yeah, I was thinking
if. I'm sorry?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. This is one of my Vegas Super Contest picks. New Orleans, I think they're kind of a little more set with their offense, and I think with Atlanta, especially, it's a good trade-off if they're getting Julio Jones, but it's going to be one of those things where they're not going to be able to dink and dunk to their tight end as much as they previously done, so it's going to be a little bit of a readjustment. So I just have a little more confidence that New Orleans is going to be able to score more points than Atlanta.
And let's not forget that New Orleans has Jimmy Graham. I don't know how we missed talking about him earlier, but Jimmy Graham, Marcus Colston, Brandon Cooks, that's a pretty potent offense there. So provided there aren't any injuries, I think the Saints are going to have another career year for Drew Brees.
Right. That's a good arsenal when your rookie of the year, Brandon Cooks, is more of a slot guy behind Marquise Colston, Stills, and Jimmy Graham.
Right. Yeah, because he can, like I said before, he's kind of Deshaun Jackson-esque. He can, you can line him up in the backfield, run reverses. He's a worker, so he'll do whatever it takes to help the team win, which is one of my biggest favorable reasons for liking the guy. So for his sake, I hope he does really well in his career. But moving right along here, we next have Minnesota at St. Louis. St. Louis is favored at -3.5.
When I first heard about Sam Bradford going out with the year at the ACL, I thought it was a bigger deal than it was. But it seems like people are still pretty confident in their quarterback situation, even though it goes from Sam Bradford to Sean Hill.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't seem like that big of a downgrade. I think the Rams defense is going to be all right. Minnesota, I don't know what their situation is. That's why I felt pretty comfortable with picking St. Louis giving 3.5. Matt Castle's their quarterback. They still have AP. They do have Greg Jennings, which is good, but
and Patterson started to have a breakout year last year too at wide receiver.
Right. St. Louis, it's more of a gut feeling.
And when in doubt, go with your gut, right?
Exactly.
Well, I went opposite of you. I took Minnesota, even with Matt Castle as quarterback. You saw how Adrian Peterson carried him last year. I think he's going to have another Adrian Peterson-esque year. I think it'll be probably I'm going to predict week 4 or 5 that Castle is replaced with Teddy Bridgewater.
You just like
him along with Blake.
You just like saying the name Teddy Bridgewater.
It's fun to say Teddy Bridgewater. It's more fun than Matt Castle in my opinion. But he's one along with Blake Bortles why I'm a little on edge about why they're not starting him over Matt Castle. Matt Castle hasn't really proven a whole lot. Teddy Bridgewater, he's not getting thrown into a situation where it's win now, we need to have the Super Bowl. Minnesota's rebuilding. They got some good pieces. Adrian Peterson is still chugging right along. The wide receivers are decent in Patterson and Jennings. Though Jennings is getting towards the end of his career. I'd say throw Teddy in there given the experience, but maybe they just don't feel he's quite ready for it. And again, since they're not in a need to win now, I guess maybe they're okay with putting him on the bench and let him just kind of take it in stride and putting him in, at a later point in the season. But I say by week 4 or 5, Bridgewater's gonna get his first start.
Yeah, unfortunately, he kind of gets he plays second fiddle only because of legacy. He does pretty well against the rush, especially last year when he was still at Louisville. He had a 70% completion rate when the defense sent 5 or more. So it's clear that he can handle the pressure. Just it's unfortunate that he kind of has to wait his turn for Matt Castle to screw up, which I also think is inevitable. Inevitable.
All right, so we're both in agreement on that aspect that Bridgewater's going to get a start after a few weeks of the season, which I think will give fans something to cheer for and to be excited about beyond the normal Adrian Peterson fanfare, which is always exciting as it is. So that'd be something to look forward to. And speaking of rookie quarterbacks, we have next Cleveland at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's at -6.5.
I feel pretty confident that the Steelers are going to be able to drum up a little more offense, especially since Cleveland is sticking to Brian Hoyer. I mean, you can't go with Johnny Football just yet, especially with Josh Gordon also out. Even though they did acquire Miles Austin, and they do have a pretty good big target with their tight end Jordan Cameron, I don't know that Cleveland is going to be able to stay on pace with Pittsburgh, especially with their great backfield. So I felt pretty comfortable taking Pittsburgh, giving up 6.5.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I took Pittsburgh. Obviously, like you said, the loss of Josh Gordon is huge. I mean, he was, I think, first or second in yards last year for receivers, and Brian Hoyer. I mean, he had some ups and downs last year, but a lot of that too was Gordon helping him out. And if Miles Austin can stay healthy, he's a serviceable wide receiver. Obviously, he lost a step or two since his prime in Dallas, but he's still a solid receiver to help the Cleveland offense. Their running back situation is a little questionable too. They have Ben Tate as a starter. I think after maybe a few weeks, it's going to be Terrence West. I think he's going to be the guy to take over the running back position. And that's just something that I think is going to come with time. They're going to probably split carries. The bulk will probably go to Tate, at first. But I think if Terrence West can get in there, show he can take the carries, take the punishment of a game, and maybe break a few tackles here and there, that'll definitely help his stock and help Cleveland out. But yeah, for week 1, I'm taking Pittsburgh. I think they're just 6.5 is just too juicy not to take at this point against Hoyer. So anything else you want to add to that one?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it. Ben Tate and West have similar size, but Tate tends to be a little more injury prone, and it might be one of those things that sooner or later they're going to let their younger guys take a turn. Maybe let Johnny Football and Terrence West take a couple of downs. So I get this feeling that Cleveland's not really comfortable even with their own situation. They feel like they can't just outright give starting opportunities in week 1 to untested rookies.
Right. No, I agree with you there. And Johnny Football has shown that I don't think mentally he's ready for the starting position. Everyone knows he likes to party and whatnot, and I think he kind of needs to get into a little bit better control, maybe mature a little bit. And I think putting him on the bench to start the season was probably the right choice. I think that's what everyone expected all along. As much as the fans would probably like to see him out there, I think it's the wise move so he can kind of get a little better feel. If they're getting blown out, you put him in at garbage time. Do you think he starts at all this season? And if so, what week?
I don't see why he wouldn't. I mean, he's too high profile not to. He did so well at Texas A&M. I don't know why they wouldn't at least give him a shot, especially if the Cleveland Browns find themselves way out of playoff contention. If I had to guess, I'd say week 8 or 9. I think it gets to that point that they either something happens to Hoyer, maybe he doesn't play up to his potential, or maybe that's the point where the Browns just figure that it's time to start building for next year.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I was thinking week 9, maybe 10. If Hoyer stays healthy and puts up performances, but isn't necessarily great. By that point, they know they're out of the playoffs. Then I say put Johnny Manziel in. See what he can do at that point. Like you said, they're out of the playoffs, so why not put him in just to get in that experience? And one thing, this is slightly off topic here, but since we're on the topic of Cleveland, I'll bring it up here. LeBron James is back in Cleveland. Obviously, they're a heavy favorite now for the NBA championships next year, with Kevin Love now in the mix. I always thought it would be interesting to know what the response would be if Cleveland were to if the Browns were to bring a championship back to Cleveland before the Cavaliers. Like, I honestly know that's really far-fetched, and the Browns winning the Super Bowl this year is incredibly unlikely. But I always thought it might take away some of the appeal that LeBron was bringing back when he came back to Cleveland. Don't you think?
I think if it was the Cleveland Browns doing it before, that's even more salt in the wound. The fact that the Browns kind of have this rough history. The last time they won a championship was 1964.
Yeah, something like that.
So, I mean, their drought's a little longer than the Cavaliers, but I think if the Browns are able to do it before the Cavaliers, I think LeBron might be a little sour about that.
I think so too, and you and I had talked about this before when LeBron made the letter, or wrote the letter that he was coming back to Cleveland. You had suggested that it was kind of egotistical of him to kind of put the city on his back, and that he's going to bring it a championship. He's the guy that's going to do it. LeBron. So I just kind of thought it would be humorous to think about what would happen if the Browns brought a championship back before the Cavaliers did. But I don't really see that happening anytime soon.
Well, nothing would give me more joy, but again, you're right. I don't think that's going to happen.
Right. All right, so moving along here, next up we have Oakland at the Jets. Raiders at the Jets. Jets are -5.5.
Preface by saying this is another one of my Vegas Super Contest, in air quotes, picks. I like the Jets. I don't know why. I feel like they have enough good players on their offense that they can do a little bit of damage with, especially against Oakland, Oakland's weird. Oakland has a lot of good players, but they're all over their depth chart. I mean, if you would have told me last year that Darren McFadden would have been, not a starter in Oakland, I would have thought that's crazy. But I guess they felt like they had to bring somebody else in, so they got Maurice Jones-Drew. And then they're going to let Derek Carr start over Matt Schaub, which is interesting choice. So I don't know what the Raiders are trying to accomplish, but again, I kind of like the Jets. So that's why I figured they could do all right, even giving up 5.5.
Yeah, and they're playing in New York, so obviously the home field advantage. I think the rule of thumb is home field advantage is automatically 3 points. So, I can see your points. I actually have Oakland. I don't think they're going to win the game outright, but I think they're going to keep it close with the Jets. I don't know why per se. Maybe Derek Carr does better than people think. He can't certainly do any worse than Matt Schaub did at Houston last year. I think Matt Schaub holds the records for most pick sixes, so that may have been why they decided to go with the rookie as a starter there in Oakland. And that's kind of the same aspect as Cleveland, Minnesota. Oakland's obviously rebuilding. They're not going to win anything anytime soon. Like you said, they have a lot of good players. They just have to figure out how to put it all together. And if McFadden stays healthy, he can put up some numbers. And Maurice Jones-Drew as well, even though he's not in his prime anymore, he can still be a very serviceable running back to give McFadden some spells and, split the carries to kind of lighten the load on both of them. So I have Oakland. I'm just not a big believer in the Jets. Whether it's Geno Smith. I know they have Eric Decker. I don't know how Decker's going to do without Peyton Manning and Demaryius Thomas, taking some of the attention away from him. And Geno Smith just didn't wow me very much last year. He had flashes of brilliance, but that's all they were just flashes. So until he proves to me that he can consistently be a solid starting quarterback, I'm going to go with Oakland on this one, and hope for the best on that one. That is not one of my super contest picks, but the next one is. Next up, we have Cincinnati and Baltimore. Baltimore -2.5. I took Cincinnati, even though it's in Baltimore. I just think Cincinnati has too many weapons on offense, like we had talked about before with A.J. Green and Giovanni Bernard. And Cincinnati's defense is solid as well. They have solid cornerbacks, solid safeties. Baltimore's kind of up in the air for me. Flacco had a bad year last year. Again, they're missing Ray Rice for the first couple games of this year, so I'm not quite sure what to make of Baltimore at this point. So I'm taking Cincinnati.
You're right. Dalton, he gets the benefit of the doubt until he proves me wrong. So the fact that I still believe in him, I still believe that the Cincinnati offense is, somewhat good, and Baltimore's defense is getting a little older. I took the same thing. Cincy by 2.5. Given to him. Cincy is beating the spread.
Agreed. And that is, air quote, one of my super contest picks, if I were doing the super contest.
If such a thing were to occur.
If that were to happen. So, and next up we have the Washington football team against the Houston Texans. And Houston is -3.
I don't like that Houston -3. That was largely it. Houston may win. They're kind of getting this fresh start, the new quarterback. They do have Andre Johnson. I don't know. I feel like RG3, it's kind of that weird nebulous point where he has to show that he's kind of worth the price that they paid, and he kind of has to start leading the Washington football team a little better. So that's why I have a little more faith in Washington. Maybe even winning the game outright, above gaining 3 points in the spread. I wouldn't be completely shocked if they won the game.
All right, very valid points. I have Houston in that. I know they have a new coach in Bill O'Brien. I know he's not totally proven in the NFL. If you recall, he was the quarterbacks coach in New England before taking over at Penn State for the last year, where he did a great job with the program. I think they finished better than everyone expected. I think Houston might have been a little quick to pull the trigger on him, hiring him as the coach after just one season as a head college coach. But we'll see what happens. They got Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback. They traded for Ryan Mallett as from New England. He was there when O'Brien drafted him at New England. So I thought that was kind of interesting. They've already worked together. It might not be long before we see Fitzpatrick out and Mallett in. And it seems Fitzpatrick is good for about a month, and then the rest of the year he's just okay or not good. I know he had a enormous contract with Buffalo that he couldn't live up to. They were disappointed with him up there, but I think he's got the weapons around him, a little bit more weapons than he had in Buffalo. He's, like you said, he's got Andre Johnson. Arian Foster's still one of the best running backs when he's healthy. They also have DeAndre Hopkins at wide receiver, who was starting to come on at the end of last season. So I think he's going to be a threat as well. Take some of the pressure off Andre. So I have Houston. And it's like you said, it kind of comes down to RG3 on the Washington side. They have Deshaun Jackson. Pierre Garçon was a solid receiver last year. They have Alfred Morris, who's a solid running back as well. Had a great rookie campaign. But if RG3 is able to sit in the pocket a little longer and make the throws that he's capable of making, I can see Washington winning the game. But let's not forget Houston's defense. They have Clowney, as you mentioned earlier, is your pick for Rookie of the Year, and J.J. Watt. And you can't double team one and let the other guy go. So and JJ is incredibly good at swatting the ball at the line of scrimmage. So that's something RG3 is going to have to be prepared to go against there. So I think that would be an interesting game to watch, especially Clowney's first professional game. See how he handles the pressure of being the number one overall pick. But I have Houston winning that game. And that is, let's see what's next on the list here. We have Tennessee at Kansas City. Kansas City's -3.5.
I don't know that I have a justifiable reason for this pick. However, I am picking Kansas giving 3.5 points, and I don't know why. Their team isn't very good, even though they still have Jamal Charles. They don't have Dwayne Bowe, and they do have Alex Smith. I'm sort of talking myself out of this as we talk about it. Now, I don't know. I don't have. There are people that I know that have faith in some of the players for Tennessee, but I don't. I don't know why. I just don't.
It's kind of a lesser of two evils for you.
Right. I have less faith in Tennessee than I do Kansas City. That's the only justifiable reason I guess I have.
I'm sure Kansas City fans would love to hear that. I'm just looking at their depth chart now. Like you said, Dwayne Bowe's out for a bit. Their number one receiver at this point is Donnie Avery. And their number two is on this depth chart at least. It's Frankie Hammond. So Donnie Avery, everyone knows from his days in New Orleans. Who he's a solid guy, but he's not a number one receiver. And Dwayne Bowe just can't seem to stay out of trouble. So, and Alex Smith, he's very good at having a solid completion rate, but he's not really good at the deep ball. He doesn't quite have the arm that some of the other guys have in the league. So if you watch a lot of Kansas City games last year, there weren't a whole lot of deeply thrown balls, and part of that's Andy Reid's game plan. He adjusted it to Alex Smith. And me being an Eagles fan and spending too much time around Andy Reid, I'm not too big of a fan. I think Kansas City is going to regress this year. I do have, in this game in particular, I have Tennessee. I have Tennessee winning at 3.5. I think Jake Locker is going to have a solid year. As I mentioned before, the rookie running back for Tennessee, Bishop Sankey, I think he's going to be, a surprise, a sleeper, if you will. So I think Tennessee has the stuff to beat Kansas City, and put up a fight on their end. I just think last year Kansas City was kind of a bit of a fluke, just based on their schedule. But yeah, I just feel like this is going to be a down year for Kansas City. And they're not going to be able to repeat what they were able to last year.
Right, and they're going to have a tougher road ahead of them, especially getting the second place schedule. Looking at their point differential, it's not super surprising that they had the year that they did. But you're right. I think just going 11-5 was something that nobody ever expected. So they're going to regress back to something that's a little more their speed.
Right, and I think they started the season like 9-0 or 10-0 or something like that, which blew everybody away before getting their first loss. So I don't see that happening again this year. Their defense is still solid. They still have some good guys, provided they can stay away from the injury bug. So it'll be a team to keep an eye on and see what they can do after last year's season and their complete shock of a loss in the playoff game against Indianapolis. But moving right along, next up we have New England at Miami, and New England's favored at -5.
I think it's going to be an overwhelming game for New England defensively. Maybe not offensively. It seems a lot of people have somewhat less faith in Tom Brady than I think is warranted, but their defense is just going to be too overwhelming, even for Ryan Tannehill having some extra protection. And I think the New England's going to win this one pretty handily.
Okay, so you're taking New England then.
Yeah.
I'm going against you here. I'm going for Miami. I think Miami is gonna give them a tough game. I think New England's gonna win outright. But I think it's gonna be like a 2 or 3 point win for New England. So I think Miami's gonna cover that. Like you said, they got protection for Ryan Tannehill. They still have Mike Wallace. Brian Hartline was becoming a very reliable receiver last year. Charles Clay at tight end, I think, is a solid choice again for a target. And as I mentioned earlier, they have no Sean Moreno in the backfield. While he hasn't had the career a lot of people expected him to have coming out of Georgia, he's still going to be, in my opinion, a solid running back for them, especially when they want to do the screen passes, because he's pretty good at breaking tackles and getting out into the open. So that'll be a fun game to watch, and I'll be watching it with a couple Miami fans, so I'll be rooting alongside them.
Oh, so this is you gave in to peer pressure. I see. So this choice was just based.
Hey, I said New England would win outright, but Miami would cover the spread. So I mean, I'm trying to play both cards here. So all right, moving next, we have Carolina at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is -2.5.
I don't think I understand that line, so I took Carolina +2.5, and I'm making it yet another one of my Vegas Super Contest picks. Especially based on last year. I know I shouldn't be doing that. But Carolina's defense is a little better than Tampa's, and I think their offense, even though they do have Mike Evans, they do have a new quarterback. I don't know. I have more faith in a banged up Cam Newton than I do in Josh McCown.
You think so?
Yeah.
Because McCown was starting to really come on last year. I mean, there were a lot of, good spot starts for him and some surprise moments that I think people kind of build up that this year is going to be kind of a breakout year for him.
Yeah, it was a little too much of a transition going from Josh Freeman to Josh McCown for Tampa.
Josh
Freeman. But I think that Carolina, even though they don't have a lot of superstars outside of their quarterback, I think their defense is just going to be able to take care of most of the workload for them.
All right, and that's understandable. I went the opposite. I took Tampa. I just think Tampa's offense is better than Carolina's. 2.5. If it was any more than that, if it was 3.5, I might reconsider. But I think Tampa could win the game by 3. I think Josh McCown's going to have a solid year, and throwing to Mike Evans and having the veteran and Vincent Jackson, leading the way. Doug Martin's a great running back. I think he's going to have a great year as well. So I think between that, it's just going to be a little bit too much for Carolina's defense. And as you said, besides Cam Newton, Carolina doesn't have a whole lot on offense. They have Jonathan Stewart, D'Angelo Williams. They drafted Kelvin Benjamin, who could be a breakout star. But other than that, Brandon LaFell at the other wide receiver, he's serviceable. But I don't see Carolina winning this game, even at 2.5 points. So I took Tampa. Let's go next. We have. Do we talk about Buffalo and Chicago?
Not yet.
Okay.
Chicago. Now we are.
Okay, now we are. All right. Chicago is -7.
I think it's too many points. I think it's going to be one of those garbage time situations where Chicago is going to have the game pretty well in hand, but then maybe a lucky grab by Sammy Watkins or something. I feel like 7's too many. That's why I'm taking Buffalo +7.
Okay. I have Chicago, and if I were doing the Vegas Super Contest, this would be one of my picks. I think Chicago's offense is just too much, and Buffalo's defense is not enough. Like I mentioned earlier, with the injuries to Buffalo's defense, I don't think they're going to be able to keep up with Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, Matt Forte. I think it's going to have another solid year, provided he stays healthy. So I took Chicago, and I think they're going to win by more than 7. So, but but it will be fun to watch. Sammy Watkins in his first game to see how he does against Bears defense. All right, next we got San Francisco at Dallas. San Francisco is -5.
This is one of those games I tried to figure out exactly what was going to happen. And I have a feeling it's going to be one of those situations where it's going to be close the whole game. Colin Kaepernick's going to drive right down the field and score late TD. They're going to go up on like maybe 10 or something. And then Tony Romo is going to score a touchdown. They're going to try to do an onside kick, and then they're going to lose. And they're going to say, well, at least Tony Romo did pretty good. So that's why I felt pretty comfortable, even though my logic doesn't make sense. Anyway, I took San Francisco -5 because I have a feeling it's going to come down to Dallas needs another quick possession for a touchdown. Gotcha.
I also took San Francisco, and this one would be one of my Vegas Super Contest picks if I were doing that. I think Dallas's defense just is too bad for this game. You have Frank Gore, who's just a bruiser. He's just going to pound for a lot of yards. They don't have DeMarcus Ware, so they don't really have a run stopper. They're going to be defending Anquan Bolden, Michael Crabtree, and the wide receiver slots. I just don't think it's going to be that. And then having to keep an eye on Kaepernick, who can take off and run for 50 yards at any given time. I think it's just going to be too much for the Dallas defense. So I took San Fran at -5, and I feel pretty comfortable with that, even though it is in Dallas. So let's move along to Indianapolis at Denver. Denver's -7.5.
I think the Colts are going to get a little lucky at the end of the game.
No pun intended.
Oh, was that a pun? Oh, I didn't even know that. Just kidding. I knew that was a pun. Again, it's one of those situations where I think it's just way too many points. So I gave Indianapolis the nod just because I think 7.5 is just too much. And the way Andrew Luck is able to kind of play the field general, especially as you brought up with last year's playoff game, I think it's too much of a spread. I think Denver's gonna come out of the gate really hot, maybe go up by double digits or so, but I think it's gonna cool off a little towards the end of the game, and maybe one of those garbage situations.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. I took Indianapolis. I think the points were just a little too much, even though Denver scored points like crazy last year. I think Indianapolis is going to have the year this year. Andrew Luck is basically Peyton Manning 2.0 in my opinion. He's got the receivers. He's got T.Y. Hilton. He's got Reggie Wayne. He's got Akeem Nicks, who has some of the biggest hands in the NFL. So if he could be productive as kind of the third receiver, that's just a bonus. If, as I was mentioning earlier, if they can get Trent Richardson into rhythm, just get him to grind away at the line of scrimmage, that's going to be a plus. And I think they'll be able to hang with Denver. I don't know that they'll win outright, but I think they'll at least cover the spread there at 7.5. And I think that'll be a fun game to watch. You never want to bet against Peyton at night, especially at home. But I think for spread purposes, Indianapolis could cover that. And then next up, we have the Giants at the Lions. Lions are -5.5.
I have a little more faith than it seems other people do in the Giants this year. I'm not sure how I feel about Eli. Everybody around him I kind of feel good about, especially Victor Cruz, who still is a good deep threat. They have, I wouldn't say dependable running backs, but they have some guys that maybe can do some damage for them. Largely, I'm just hoping, not hoping, but I'm predicting that Eli is not going to have as terrible of a year as he did last year. I don't think he can repeat that 18 touchdown, 27 interception performance, and I think they're going to have a better year this year just because they've seen what they did last year, and it's going to be a little bit of an up year for them. And I think, again, 5.5 points, it's one of those where I don't know that the game's going to be that far, especially with Detroit kind of reprioritizing their offense away from the pass. Reggie Bush and Jacques Bell, they're good runners, but I don't know that they can handle the load of kind of a more run-heavy defense. Not that they lean towards the run, but especially with the large number of wide receivers and even a couple of tight ends that Detroit has, I think the game is much more suited for heavy passing. But 5.5 is just too many points. I'm taking the Giants plus 5.5.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one. I took Detroit at minus 5.5. I think they're just going to blow out the Giants. Like you said, their Lions are not a run-heavy offense. Obviously, with Calvin Johnson, why would you be? Matthew Stafford throws for 5,000 yards almost every season that he's been in the league. Lions also added Golden Tate to the wide receiver tree. He's the number 2 behind CJ. And Reggie Bush is always an X factor, whether he's taking the handoffs or just out in the slot. For the short screen or bubble passes, he's always a threat to break open and make people miss on tackles. The thing that kind of concerns me about the Giants is they finally have a decent running back. They have Rashad Jennings. He's not fantastic. He's not terrible. As long as he holds onto the ball, I think he'll do okay there in New York. But one of the things that's going to hurt the Giants, at least for a little while, is rookie wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. out of LSU isn't practicing at this point. So, and it looks like from what I could find that he's not going to be playing Monday night. So that's kind of a slack there. But like you said, they have Victor Cruz. They still have Ruben Randall. If Victor Cruz gets back to doing more salsa dances like he did before, the Giants have a shot. But I just think Detroit's offense is too much. And Detroit's defense, their front line is still one of the best with Nick Fairley and Ndamukong Suh. So I think they're just going to get enough pressure on Eli that, they're going to cause problems. But yeah, that's kind of my thinking there with Detroit. So that would be an interesting game to keep an eye on too, and kind of see how Eli bounces back in the first game after his lackluster season last year. So last game we have up is the second Monday night game, San Diego at Arizona, and Arizona is -3.
This is the other game that I don't quite understand the line. Everybody's really up on San Diego. And I don't know that it's a similar sentiment for Arizona. So the line is a little curious that they're kind of considering it a push and just giving Arizona the benefit of the home field. I think that San Diego, we've been talking about them, bits and pieces over the last hour and a half or so. I think San Diego just is going to have a lot more of a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to have a much better season. And I don't quite understand why they're not getting the favorite in this game. So I'm taking the Chargers.
Or even if the line was more like 1.5 as opposed to 3. It may not seem like that much of a difference, and you always want to give the home team more. They always have a bit more of an advantage. But I'm with you too. When I first saw this, I thought it was a misprint. -3. Not that Arizona's terrible, but I think San Diego, will win by that easily.
No, it's too much of a cushion for. I mean, Arizona, even if they win the game, it's 3 points is a lot to give up for the spread.
Right, and this is my final quote unquote super contest pick. If I were to do that, I would have San Diego +3. Yeah, and like I said, I just think San Diego, everyone's talking them up. Everyone's got high expectations. I mean, I have them winning the Super Bowl, so obviously I think they're going to have a very good year, provided, everyone stays healthy. And you got to remember, Carson Palmer's starting for Arizona. He's not terrible, but he throws a lot of interceptions. He kind of makes some poor decisions sometimes. The more he can get the ball to Larry Fitzgerald, the better shot Arizona has. And I know a lot of people are riding high on Andre Ellington, Arizona's running back this year, expecting him to have a good year as well. So, but I think for week one's sake, I'm taking San Diego, and I think they're going to cover that spread pretty easily. All right. Well, that covers all the games for week one. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off here?
No, just excited. Just ready to get back to football. What are you looking forward to?
You know what?
Football!
I'm excited too. Me and a bunch of my college friends, we spend our Sundays all last year, and this year we'll be spending our Sundays down at a local casino, watching every game on TV and eating wings and drinking beer. So it's always fun. I have a lot of friends who root for different teams. There's a couple Eagles fans, a couple Cowboys fans, a couple Dolphins, Steelers. So it's a good mix, and we all give each other a good ribbon. So I'm looking forward to that, and obviously looking forward to doing more of these podcasts each week and discussing what happened during the previous week's game. So be sure to check back again. And any last thing you want to add?
Nope. Just excited. Just excited to be here. Excited for football. I'm just excited.
All right.
Football!
We're recording this Wednesday night. Game one is tomorrow night, Green Bay at Seattle. So hope everyone enjoys the season. Hope you get your picks in that you need to get in. And for those doing fantasy, good luck to you. Hope we didn't jinx you this week. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.